Starting in a moment. Okay. Welcome everybody to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today is Thursday, the 7th of Elul, August 27th. And as we have done in the past, we've done every Thursday, we've looked at Ethics of Our Fathers. As we know that Ethics of Our Fathers is the chapters that we learn about how we need to behave beyond the letter of the law. Yes, we know the law that is written in the Torah. However, this teaches us how we need to be better than just the law itself, but behaving beyond the letter of the law. Also, that we read these chapters of Ethics of Our Fathers during the weeks of from Passover until Rosh Hashanah, especially as we're getting closer to Rosh Hashanah. We're now only 3 weeks away from Rosh Hashanah, and this helps us energize ourselves and make ourselves better people as we prepare ourselves for the Day of Judgment. The next 3 weeks, we'll be doing 2 chapters for every Shabbos. This way, we finish the entire Ethics of Our Fathers of 6 chapters by the time of Rosh Hashanah. As we've mentioned, the month of Elul is a month of calculation, taking into consideration what we've done in the years past and the year past, and how we can be better in the year to come. So Ethics of Our Father helps us align ourselves and put ourselves in the right perspective of what things should be done, though, yes, technically, maybe they may be correct. What is right is not always correct. What is correct is not always right, meaning that there are ways how we can behave, even though that, yes, we can get away with it technically, so to speak. However, is that the right thing to do? And this begins, in fact, the first few words of Ethics of Our Fathers. The Ethics of Our Fathers begins with the words, Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Moshe received the Torah from Mount Sinai. Why does he have to tell us that Moses received the Torah from Mount Sinai? We all know that Moses received the Torah from Mount Sinai. But over here, the Mishnah is telling us, step number 1, in understanding and relating into anything in the world, you have to be kibel, you have to be willing to accept. If a person's not willing to accept, there's nobody to talk to. The reason why Moses was so great and he was able to be the greatest leader of all times, in fact, Moshe's name, he's not called Moshe HaTzadik, Moshe the righteous. He's not called Moshe Avinu, Moshe our father, like the patriarchs, but he's called Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher. Because Moshe was the greatest leader and teacher of all times, because he was kibel, he was able to receive. Not only did he give, but he was also able to receive from God's greatness, but at the same time, he was the most humble of all people, as the Torah describes in the book of Deuteronomy. And Moshe was then able to take what he received and then give it to others. If we don't receive, if we think that we know it all, and if we think that we are not able to be proper vessels and receptacles, then we can never gain, we can never share, and we can never lead. So the first step of anything spiritual, and even more so physical as well, is to realize that we are receptacles, that we have what to gain, we have what to listen to, we don't know it all, we kibel, we have to make ourselves vessels to receive. Not only that, the concept of humility teaches us that Moses got the Torah from Mount Sinai. What does it mean he got the Torah from Mount Sinai? What was Mount Sinai unique about it? That it was a small mountain, but at the same time was a mountain. We have to know our qualities, and we also have to know our deficiencies. And we have to know that in order for us to be able to see those things, we have to be able to realize that when we receive something, we then make it our own, and then we can pass it on to the next generation. If I'm merely just a pipe or a funnel passing over information from one person to the next, then what have I accomplished? I am nothing worth. I have to be Moshe Kibel. I have to understand it. I have to receive it. I have to own it. And once I own it, then I can take what I've owned and then pass it on to the next generation, pass it on to the next person that I heard. And only then can it really be internalized and brought understanding and appreciation to what is studied. If we always sit on the outside, many times people can come to a class and they say, I'm just listening. Just listening means that it's not even entering one ear to come out the other. Just listening means you're just an observer. You don't want to get involved. The concept of Moshe Kibel, Moshe is teaching us that how does one complete himself? How does one involve himself in the study of Torah is by making yourself a vessel in investing in understanding and in appreciating and realizing that you should be a receptacle. More than that. And therefore, if he goes on to say, he goes and he gave it for Moses, gave it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, elders to the prophets, and eventually it comes to the sages of the Great Assembly. But the sages of the Great Assembly, and this is where we see it most, weren't just sufficed by the fact that they received from Moses, from the prophets, from the elders. They also went on, Heim Amru Shleisha Dvarim, they said three things. They made their own advances in Torah. They've made their own understanding and appreciation of what Torah is all about. They owned it. They became part of theirs. What was it? One of them was that you should make many students. Now one may say, well, I want to be humble. I don't want to teach. I want to stay in my little corner. Over here, the Mishnah tells us that part of being a person who is humble, part of being a proper receptacle, part of being a Moshe, is that not only do you receive it, but you go on and you go to teach as many people as you can, and that's not at all egotistic. On the contrary, the more you share of your wisdom, the better you are, the greater you are, and the more humble you may be. As we see, what does it mean that a person studies Torah? That a person has to study Torah to the extent that he has to realize that the next thing that the sages of the Great Assembly men said was making fences around the Torah. What does it mean to make fences around the Torah? That a person understands and appreciates what his teacher taught him. He learned so well that he's able to advance and make it of his own, teach other students. But not only does he teach other students, but he also realizes that where his limitations are, which that's the true essence of humility. Over here, we also find that the Mishnah tells us the concept of that a person, as Moses teaches us, not only is it good enough to study Torah, but it is also an obligation to teach. As we always mention, if you know Aleph, you should teach Aleph. You know Beis, you should teach Beis. It is especially important, as Moshe taught the Jewish people, and he accepted the Torah from Mount Sinai, but made every single one of us an ambassador of the Torah, an ambassador of Judaism, that we need to go and show the world and show people around us the beauty that there is in Torah and Judaism. Then he continues another interesting point that's brought in this week's chapter, which is about the difference between what we mentioned about Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai were two great scholars. They were leaders of the Jewish people in Babylonia. Hillel was the leader, while Shammai was the ruler of the Bezdin. And over here, Hillel and Shammai talk about how we have to relate to other people. And Hillel says, be of the students of Aaron, love peace, pursue peace, and chase peace, pursue peace, and bring even people who are just by the mere creations, bring them closer to God. We know that we mentioned last time we studied this chapter that Hillel was from Moshe, meaning that Hillel was the same soul that descended on this world as Moses. And therefore, Hillel felt the responsibility of leadership just like Moses. Hillel had very many similarities like Moses. He lived for 120 years like Moses as well. We read about it in a few chapters' time where he saw even the skull of Pharaoh floating down the water. We spoke about it last time. But over here, Hillel is telling us something very important as well. Number one, Hillel says, Heve, be. He's not saying maybe, could be. He's commanding you. You got to be like the students of Aaron. You got to behave. You got to see people for kindness. You got to pursue peace. What was Hillel telling us over here? Hillel was over here explaining the concept of how it's possible for us to love every single person, even though their mere greatness is only the fact that they were a creation of God. Hillel says if you frame everything in the same frame that Aaron did, Aaron, the brother of Moshe, who was tasked with blessing the Jewish people with love, then all of a sudden, everything you see will be framed in that attitude, in that atmosphere of absolute love. What was Hillel explaining to us is that many times the reason why we see people for maybe abomination or disgusting, that therefore we don't want to have anything to do with them, is because the way we frame it, the way we see it. So what Hillel says is, step out of your box a moment. Don't look at things the way you usually do. Look at every single person from a frame as if Aaron the high priest looked at these people, which was that he wanted to make these people get along, A to B and B to C, and everybody should get along. And the only way you can look at people to get along is to take a step back and not be judgmental about them and realize that every single one of them is a creation of God, and ultimately you'll be able to bring about peace between them. Not only that, when we take a moment back and we try to see people the way it is, and we put ourselves in the back burner, we don't have that sense of humility, we can then appreciate and create a sense of relationship between people as well. One of the great students of Hillel later on of the Mishnah, his name was Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was very well known for his great scholarly works. In fact, we know Rabbi Meir was a person who was called Rabbi Meir Balanes, Rabbi Meir the miracle worker. But he also had a love for every single person. And he had many people that would come and listen to his talks. And there was this one woman who would come listen to his talks every Friday and listen to his class that he would give on Shabbat, Friday night. And because of that, she would come home late to her Friday night Shabbat meal, Shabbat dinner. And her husband was frustrated. He was not the biggest fan of Rabbi Meir. And he told his wife one week when she came home after the class, and she said, if you come home late again, or in fact, he didn't say come late. He said, now that you came home late, the only way I will stay with you in this home, and I will not give you a divorce, is if you go spit in the face of Rabbi Meir. This woman was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to do. She wants to stay with her husband, but at the same time, she has to go spit in the face of Rabbi Meir, her teacher, the great sage of the people. She quickly runs back to the synagogue. Rabbi Meir is still there with the students, and Rabbi Meir sees this woman incoming distraught, and he notices that something is wrong. And he all of a sudden he goes and he says, "Oh, I got something in my eye. I got something in my eye." To which the woman says, "What's the matter? What can I do to help you?" She says, "I got some piece of dirt in my eye. Maybe you can spit in my eye so I'll be able to get that dirt out of my eye." To which she spits. He says, "Do it again, do it again. I think I need a little more." She says, "Okay." Finally, he turns to the woman and he says, "Okay, now you can go tell your husband you spat in Rabbi Meir's face." This was a person who realized that his honor was secondary to making people get along. It wasn't about him, just because, yes, the fight was that she went to his class. But at the end of the day, he realized that the honor of, or the importance of people getting along was most important. And therefore, he put his honor aside in order that a couple should be able to get along. This is what Hillel is telling us. What was Aaron's perspective of seeing people? It wasn't how terrible a person may be or how bad this person was acting. He said, what can I do to bring people together? This is our objective as we read Ethics of Our Fathers and we come closer to Rosh Hashanah. We have to ask ourselves, what can we do to bring people together? There are so many things that can be divisive. There are so many things that can separate us from one another. But the question is, what can we do that will bring us together? There's more that unites us than divides us. And for some reason, the evil inclination just uses that 2 centimeters that divide us and makes a mountain out of a molehill, which creates acrimony and animosity and hatred from one to another. Over here, the Mishnah tells us, and Hillel reminds us, reframe yourself. Look at it from a perspective of Aaron the Kohen. Look at it from an area how you can see 2 people together, not how can you separate 2 people. This is the job that we always have to remember, regardless of what it is, whether it's in writing or whether it's in talking or whether it's in discussing or gossiping. Look to see how you can bring people together, which many times as we continue in this week's Ethics of Our Fathers, where he says that one who tries to get famous and his whole objective is to get famous, eventually he gets knocked down. Because what happens is, if you're just out there for your own self-aggrandizement, eventually it's going to come back to bite you. Finally, we come to the end of this chapter. And the end of this chapter tells us what Rabbi Gamliel used to say. Rabbi Gamliel said as follows: "All my days I've grown up amongst the sages. I've never found anything better for the body than silence. It is not the study that's most important, but it's the action that's most important. Over here, he's telling us two very important things, and they're actually intertwined. If you want to ask, is a very famous saying, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person. People that talk about things don't usually get things done. And therefore, he says over here, number one, the people who were the silent ones, those were the active ones. All the days that I've grown up amongst the sages, I've seen everything that was there. But those who were silent, those who had humility, those who understood that there's something to learn from somebody else, they were the ones that were successful. They were the ones that were able to progress. And they were the ones that had action. You can talk about something, you can study about something, but you need action. The bottom line is, are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? And to make sure we are actively doing it, not just talking about it. So God bless you. Thank you for tuning in today. Main thing is action. Let's not just study about it, but we should actually do it. All these wonderful things we spoke about, making this world a better place, looking better at people, thinking more positive about other people, bringing them all together, and ultimately God will bless us all with a ksiva v'chasima tova that will be inscribed and sealed in the book of life in the year of good. God bless you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m., as we discuss the Torah reading of the week.